because I head capped him.
Smote down by Goth.
It's too good for this world.
Insert soundbite here.
Like slip and slide out of the castle of doom under someone's feet.
I'm in your arc. Blam, Goth's rifle
Go
or...
up like a firecracker looking at you, marauders.
This just makes the way I play better.
That is like an oh god please stop amount of damage.
Welcome to the Odysseus Legion Podcast. Incoming message.
Hi everyone, this is Nicholas. I am popping in at the start of this episode because I wanted to make sure everyone knows that towards the end of this episode we talk about some upcoming events in Ithaca. Specifically, a one-day Iliad tournament for my birthday, and multiple events at the Finger Lakes Area Gaming Convention, or FlagCon. Make sure to listen to the end to find out more. Hello, and welcome to the 4th episode of the Odysseus Legion Podcast. My name is Nicholas, and I will be your host for today as we talk about all things competitive BattleTech. Joining me, as usual, are my co-hosts Garner.
Hello.
And Luke.
Hello.
Also joining us today is a special guest, John.
Hello.
Our goal is not to be another news podcast, as I know I get tired of seeing so many different podcasts covering the latest convention, the latest release, but we had to make a special exception to talk about the release of proposed changes to the core rules of BattleTech. This also seemed like an appropriate time to discuss what exactly we mean by competitive BattleTech as compared to narrative play. Before we get into that, John is a Catalyst Game Labs demo agent, the same as Garner and myself. John, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is John Hollenbeck. I am a demo agent, as you said. I have been a longtime BattleTech player since 2nd edition, 1987, off and on. A lot of lapsed play here and there, but always stayed in the BattleTech realm, especially through the Dark Ages, both figuratively and metaphorically. I kept up on BattleTech mainly through BattleCore when FASA was out and FanPro was in and everything went clicky tech, and just kind of stayed in the background, but always seeing what BattleTech was up to, and jumped back in with the last 2 Kickstarters and have been going ever since.
And you are actually my game master for a Time of War RPG.
Correct. That hopefully we will have another session here soon. As with most RPGs, scheduling everyone gets to be a pain, but we are trying our best to get back on track. It's been a year now.
It's been a blast. I'm hoping I could still make, if not every session, at least, every other or so at this point.
Yes. Yep. And again, the joys of trying to keep an RPG group together.
And what has everyone else been up to?
Well, I have just been goofing around with my clan invasion. Smoke Jaguars, getting the final paint scheme done, have 2 stars fully painted now, which is nice. And been goofing around with some lists, stay lower in the tech tree, unlike all you ill clan players up down there.
I actually had time to do some BattleTech stuff this past week. I finished a Javelin, which has been mocking me from my paint stand for a couple of months now. And I also got time for a game with the new playtest rules in, which I didn't want to just make comments on this without having at least some experience with this, even if it is only one game.
Despite a lot of stuff going on in my life, I managed to get a whole bunch of BattleTech stuff in and make some plans. I've got 2 playtests in. I got a competitive match against a multi-BTCC big old tournament winner, which was a very interesting experience and will probably come up on a future episode. Started planning a tournament and some other stuff going on. So yeah, still doing, well, not really Monday night Mega Mech. It's kind of when I have the ability to do it night Mega Mech.
Yeah, it's weekly Mega Mech.
My best efforts on weekly Mega Mech. Now, the goal of this podcast is to discuss competitive play of this game that we love. But what does that actually mean? Competitive play, sort of in my opinion, places the primary focus on the game itself, the physical game that you're engaging with. It goes to great lengths attempting to create a fair and balanced system of play that rewards skill and creative choices. Most tournaments are competitive. This is somewhat contrasting to narrative play, which places primary or significant emphasis on a narrative. This could take the shape of an ongoing campaign, historical reenactment, an RPG, a mercenaries contract system that's pretty popular right now and kind of a really nice thing. It is important to know that you can have a competitive game with narrative elements or a narrative game that values a healthy level of competition. There is no simple or easy dichotomy between these styles of play, but a spectrum of loose primary emphasis that is often made better by blending the two together. With that said, what are everyone's thoughts on competitive versus narrative play?
Most events that you kind of see nowadays have a small little sprinkling of narrative in it because, we play faction lock. You can't just take the entire list of mechs in the world, cherry pick what you want.
I feel like a competitive format, you're right, absolutely correct, can't let anyone pick anything they want to. And BattleTech, because it doesn't have a clearly distinct flavor mechanical difference between different factions, it's not like StarCraft where you have the Terran, the Zerg, and the Protoss. I can't speak anything about 40k.
Don't worry, I can get into that.
But without such a distinct sort of built-in difference, you have to apply one. Even purely on a competitive level, you have to apply some sort of list building restrictions that lock people into making choices without access to everything. And BattleTech, I think the best way, I haven't seen any even competing way of doing this is faction locking.
I disagree with that slightly because, prime example, right before 5th edition 40k died and transitioned to 6th, the last few major grand tournaments that happened, 5 out of every 6 players played the exact same faction. And that faction was Grey Knights, and that faction just had the best tools. Everybody played almost the exact same list. It was kind of like playing chess. I didn't, because I was a disgusting demon player, and I lost almost all my games because I was playing against the demon hunters. But whatever.
You see this in a lot of competitive games. Like, there was a recent episode over the course of the summer in which Magic the Gathering's premier kind of pro event, the top 8 was entirely composed of 2 lists which were both running a lot of the same cards. It was, I think, a blue and red list, and then basically an all-red aggro list.
The VV Cauldron was like 7 of the 8.
Nope. This was before that version. This was the list. It was VV Prowess, I think. And then Mono Red Aggro were the 2 that top-8'd Pro Tour Final Fantasy. So, the idea that in the long term, so this is one of the things with competitive BattleTech, is a little bit of a misnomer. It's a big and unwieldy system with a lot of variance in it, and a lot of people do not take the game seriously because it's a competitive outlet, and I think that's entirely fair. I think there are a lot of reasons why BattleTech isn't a very good competitive game, but because a lot of people don't play it as such, I think we are looking at the game from a relatively kind of nascent competitive meta. There may be some time in the future where there is a BattleTech tournament that happens where, hey, everyone is running functionally the same list, because it turns out there are mechs that are best in class for BV and kind of the roles you want. I know the Firemoth P and the Firemoth H have both been kind of bandied around as examples of this for a fast striker, for instance. I do want to push back on the idea that BattleTech is safe from that, Garner.
Yeah.
Because I think we haven't necessarily seen it yet, and I think the role of a kind of competitive organizer is to make sure that as BattleTech gains some sort of scene of people who are interested in kind of playing the game to the fullest of its kind of systems the way people play the game doesn't become kind of stale and stagnant.
Yeah, so looking at it from a Alpha Strike point of view, I'm not saying that we're homogenous or anything like that, but what I'm saying is more along the lines of, like, big example was, last episode we talked about Nova and how I think I was the only Federated Suns player that did not run the NAIS Thunderbolt out of like the 15 that were there because it's so well statted for Alpha Strike.
Alpha Strike loses a lot of the nuance that allows so much difference between lists and play of various units.
But like one of the things that I do see is like the Rifleman 2C with the 4 large pulse lasers, that tends to show up a decent amount of time in lists that I see people like asking me to critique, and then I tell them, do you want friends or not? But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing with kind of any sort of competitive game is the goal is not to make friends. The goal ultimately of a kind of competitive format is to exploit the systems of the game to the fullest extent within the rule to kind of win matches. And I think we can talk about, like, there are definitely kind of problems with that in BattleTech right now as far as the way the point system is set out and kind of the kind of flaws of battle value and the way those are kind of frequently exploited. I don't necessarily know that social aspect necessarily has that much bearing in a competitive discussion.
So John, part of the reason we invited you here today is to provide a bit more insight into narrative play as someone who is my game master and is very interested in worldwide events and just narrative play in general. So what are your thoughts?
I definitely prefer narrative. Tournament, competitive, it's fine, but as you've seen, I don't go out of my way to engage in it. I'd like it, but I do like all the bells and whistles and alternate things you can do with narrative that just would never fly in a competitive thing, or it would be very difficult. Quirks, spas, which I know some competitive do have spas, but I think the best spas tend to rise to the top, as most things do.
Yeah.
Special pilot abilities for those that...
I like the nuts and bolts of campaign operations. I like tracking ammo and armor and increasing player skills and all that good stuff, which you can bolt some of that onto competitive, but most competitive is one and done. Well, you mentioned like mercenary contracts. That's kind of a blending of the two. The contract system that came out sort of in the box set, but it was more fleshed out in Hinterlands, where you are doing sort of one-offs, but at the same time you're also earning quasi XP to level up your characters, you're repairing your mechs, things like that. But it's very low level, but it still appeals to me. I'd like there to be consequences, let's put it that way. And I think that's the thing with competitive that kind of turns me away, where it's like, all right, that battle's done. I had fun, but ultimately it didn't mean anything. Now on to the next one. I'm going to fight you again. Everything's fixed, which is fine, but I just always steer more towards the narrative side of it.
You like the progressive.
Yes. Yeah.
As opposed to running multiple simulations to see what could happen in different scenarios.
Competitive, you're enjoying the game for the sake of the game itself. Narrative, you're like, okay, that happened. What next? What's the next part of the story for these guys, for this group? Like, how do I fix this? You want more beyond that game.
Yes. Getting hit in the cockpit in competitive sucks. Getting hit in the cockpit in narrative could be a major story note. I'd like that. Or trying to explain how it didn't kill your pilot, but left him brutally injured or whatever, depending on the system. Especially if you use the Time of War rules, you can really flesh it out. Lots of tables, as we love.
You lose a 2-3 pilot in competitive. You're like, well, I invested too much BV in that. That's a disadvantage to me. You lose a 2-3 pilot in narrative, and you're like, no, Jimmy, you had a family.
Are you telling me that we're nuzlocking in narrative play right now?
Roughly.
Depends on the narrative. But in terms of the concept that I laid out, do you agree with that concept of narrative and competitive?
No, I think that all makes sense.
So, like, What I was trying to say, like with like competitive versus narrative, is that most things that we say are competitive still have a little bit of narrative stuff added in as like a guide rail, because otherwise, eventually you would end up turning into chess.
Oh yeah, I don't think anyone wants purely one or purely the other.
Yeah.
Let's look at it this way. When we had the split leagues for Rochester and Ithaca, the Rochester people, we played mechs. Maybe an elemental or two, or some variation of battle armor. And the rest of the force was mechs. Go down, played against you guys. So I was playing against helicopters, tanks, infantry. This season, there's a guy that has, 3 mechs total? And then...
Two.
2 mechs, like 4 infantry, and a ton of vehicles.
We had the structure of you're allowed 4 infantry, 4 vehicles. It didn't really occur to us that somebody would min-max their way to, I'm going to bring both of those and only have room for 2 mechs, but they're going to be big mechs.
If it was an Alpha Strike list, I wouldn't have been surprised. But as a classic list, I was surprised to see that.
And I was looking at it like that list looks like the Alpha Strike list that I submitted for Southern Assault, and I was like, and I felt dirty bringing that to Southern Assault, because like at that point, like I guess my issue with like competitive versus narrative is that before I submit any list to like any competitions or whatever, I run it by my brother, who's like one of the biggest lore hounds I've ever met. They're like, all right, this is what I was going for with this background. What do you think? And he's like, yeah, no, you should do this. This doesn't make sense with it, and I'm like, cool, awesome. I want it to be lore accurate and have a narrative thing, because I want the people that are showing up to get that theme, and it's not just, oh yeah, look, I'm running Federated Suns, Davian Guards, and I'm just bringing the best stuff always, forever. Like, no.
Yeah, I do appreciate lore relevant lists, locking it into faction specific units, however you want to dictate that, the master unit list or whatever. Now, would you consider scenarios as being a narrative aspect, or is it just another way to tweak competitive?
So scenarios are kind of a difficult thing, because we talked about this a little bit in the Nova thing, where you have, again, a narrative and competitive spectrum of scenarios where if you're playing way too, here's a competitive mission, it turns into a game. It feels like you look at this and go, this makes no sense. I can't abstract this at all to a real world concept of like what would happen in combat. And trying to find a point where you can have a mirror match that feels vaguely like something that would happen, versus at a certain point, like you have too deep into the narrative scenarios where you have 2 different, forces with not the same objectives, and like, okay, one team has to go destroy a building while the other team has to like scan the other force, and it just, if you don't know what the other person is doing, if you're not trying to complete the same goals, it doesn't really work very well in competitive. And so the scenarios that we have, I'm really happy with, in terms of the ideas start with a concept of, okay, this might happen in a battlefield in this universe, but it's mirrored, it has a reflection, it might be a bit abstracted, but it's not overly gamified.
Well, now you're making me want to do some playtesting with the missions where each person rolls off, and that's the mission that your opponent is gotta play. And now I kind of want to try that out, because that gets me real excited now.
Well, I think that's kind of how the contracts work, isn't it?
It's exactly how the contracts work.
Yeah, one side could be doing a recon, the other side is doing disengage or something, and you're both trying to accomplish your goal. The one thing I haven't seen done in competitive is mismatched BVs.
Because that just ends very poorly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they try to introduce it in some of the scenarios they do in like Shrapnel. It'll be something like you deploy 75% of your force first, and they can deploy up to 200% in defense of you or something like that. They do uneven.
There are competitive events, or at least kind of structured events that I know of, that have done things like this, but it is almost always in a kind of a very, very regimented way. Like the one that I'm thinking of is a like event that I remember seeing a bunch of planning for, and the organizers did quite a bit of playtesting. It was an event where everyone was going to be playing basically the same scenario, like a beachhead assault. I believe the attackers got a battle value advantage over the defenders because the defenders were, obviously they were defending effectively uphill entrenched positions. I have seen some attempts to do kind of a more kind of serious event with battle value mismatches, but they're very rare, and the ones that I have seen that have done it well have also done a lot of work dialing it in, because it is something that you need to spend a lot of time dialing in if you don't want to screw it up.
If I recall, Adepticon this year, I was looking at the missions for the BattleTech events there. Their structured narrative event that they had there had mismatched BVs. Or PVs, because this was Alpha Strike was the one I was looking at specifically. Mm-hmm. But narrative, that's fine. That makes sense. You're trying to show an overwhelming force, because those do happen. There is not always, I am bringing the same amount of stuff you are. That's not what happens in real life. So, again, I hate doing this, but bringing it to, the 40k analogy, one of the most imbalanced times in competitive 40k was in 7th edition, when tons of armies just got a grillion free things. Demons just summoned entire new armies on top of their opponents. If you played Adeptus Mechanicus, every single upgrade in your army was free, so you could just load yourself to the gills with every piece of war gear under the sun, and it didn't cost you anything. Things like that. And that was one of the most unhealthy sections of competitive Warhammer I played. 20 years I played Warhammer.
Now, before we move on, I want to put on the record here, I really enjoy narrative play. Honestly, it might be my preferred way of playing, but in terms of setting up, just a regular, attempted a regular weekly play, way back we talked in the intro, I've had the bar, I created Sunday War Games, and Luke was there right from the start. I started looking at all these other formats, all these other ideas. I saw some sort of semi-competitive narrative stuff, and Luke kicked me in the shit and said, no, must be mirror matches. What are you talking about? And Iliad kind of came from there, and I've staken my position as a developer of formats and organizer on competitive. And we'll talk about this more when we do probably our next episode on Iliad, but I would say, as we're doing this competitive podcast, I don't actually devalue the narrative experience. I just have a focus right now on competitive.
I think part of that is just that casual play requires a level of good faith that requires kind of pre-existing relationships with players. I think that's relatively easy to build. We've seen, John, you have been running a Time of War campaign. We have stores up in Syracuse, and I don't know if Rochester is, but I know Syracuse is running stuff with the Mercenaries contract, so it's definitely something you can do. But in our case, we have kind of structured ourselves around these kind of anyone walk-in events, and as a result of that, we need a little bit more structure in order to facilitate that. So I think that's one of the main reasons we gravitated towards more competitive framework.
It's about setting up a social contract.
Yeah, a competitive game has a pre-existing social contract that you don't necessarily need to rely on building one with the other players.
Correct, and you don't have to, lack of a term, feel bad for bringing something that may or may not be unfair to a newer person. I'm a firm believer that C3 in Alpha Strike is an absolute noob stomper.
C3 in Classic is a noob stomper.
That's because people don't bring ECM. Don't bring at least one ECM mech. Silly gooses. I'm thinking Artemis doesn't exist. Otherwise, where you get kind of things like that, where it's oh yeah, I showed up with a full C3 company, and then you have 2 spotters right next to their entire force and kill a lance a turn.
Speaking of killing MX every turn.
I wanted to talk about narrative and competitive play before we got into the rules changes that have been proposed, because I think it's important to understand that these rules and their implementation and how people react to them will vary greatly based on which side of this sort of, not a coin exactly, but which side of this spectrum is your primary emphasis while playing BattleTech. So recently CGL released 2 sort of proposed rules packets, and we're going to start with the packet 1, which contains 2 sort of main points, which is a change to the side hit location table and a change to ammo explosions. Now, in the side hit location change, all side hit location table columns are deleted. So your left side table, your right side table for both regular punching and kicking, leaving only the front and rear, front/rear column.
Well, technically the kick hasn't changed.
Oh, technically the click hasn't changed. Okay. So what happens with this is when an attacker in a side arc hits the target, you use the front-rear hit location table, and any hits in the opposite side from the arc the attacker is in counts for that side. So if you are in the right arc and you hit the right arm, a hit works. But if you're in the left arc and the table says you hit the right arm, it becomes a hit to the left arm instead. I have a lot to say about this, so bear with me and welcome to my TED Tech lecture here. So
Tech Talk.
Tech Talk, yeah. I have spoken several times about how mechs have like this dichotomy where they're either made of titanium or they're made of balsa wood. And in practically every situation where a mech dies suddenly or endures beyond expectations, the significant factor, the key thing that's making it behave this way is the distribution of damage. Right? How many times have you shot at an enemy mech looking to hit that one open location? How many times are you staring at this thing being like, why haven't I hit the left torso? I hit everywhere else. But then when damage is dispersed, mechs survive a lot longer than when it's concentrated. And I'm not going to mince words here. I think this is a terrible rule and a terrible proposal. It fundamentally changes how the mechanics of the game operate in terms of positioning and damage distribution. Currently, your chance to hit the arc torso, which is the torso on the arc you're standing in, so right, left, right arc, is 19%. It's the same odds as hitting the arc arm. When the proposed rules change, the odds jump to 28%. Now, I did an experiment. Imagine that instead of rolling for your damage, you just assigned it to each location based on your chance to hit that location. So if you were dealing 10 damage to a target, and a location, say the arc torso, would normally have a 19% chance to be hit, that location takes 1.9 damage. And you iterate this out, so you continue dealing damage, and then when a location is destroyed, the damage that would hit that location continues on by the damage transfer. So if the arm is destroyed, that damage would go into the attached torso and so on. Using this and the average maximum structure and armor for a mech, you get some interesting results here.
Incoming message.
This is post-recording Nicholas popping in just to provide some clarification. The numbers I use here are based on an average calculated from the maximum armor and structure for all standard mech tonnages, which it turns out is fairly close to the stats for a 55-ton mech. However, the end results are even worse when you use the numbers for specific tonnages of mechs. So to be clear, while the math I present here is for a hypothetical average mech, when you calculate these same mathematical stats for real mech tonnages, the new rule performs even worse. So from the front, it takes 247 damage to destroy a mech all the way through to the center torso. From the rear, using the same sort of system, that same mech dies from a center torso destruction at 145 damage. The proposed rules, right, by this new location table, a mech dies at 147 damage. Okay, what's even worse though, is that a mech loses its arc torso at 114 damage versus 143 damage from the rear. So, numbers aside, what this really means is that the most vulnerable arc for a mech in terms of not just destruction, but
Crippling.
crippling it. Yeah, reducing its combat effectiveness in terms of you get rid of the arm, you get rid of the torso, it's no longer functioning. It doesn't always die as fast, but it loses combat effectiveness the fastest. Is going to be from these arcs.
Spoken like
right?
a clanner. Imagine not having an ISXL.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. If you have an Inner Sphere XL engine, this is the worst arc to be attacked from. This is horrible. This will mean Inner Sphere XLs might just not be viable in a lot of competitive formats unless you have something specific, right? This means from the side arcs, mechs are roughly as durable as the rear, but accumulate location loss and internal damage faster. They suffer more critical hits and more detrimental effects. It's just math. Suddenly, fast mechs with firepower, mechs that can choose their arc, can find the position to shoot at, become horrifying as they just procedurally rip into a mech from the side, and the only thing stopping this process is winning or losing initiative. So initiative becomes so much more important, particularly if you have two players that are both operating under this rules construct and have fast mobile mechs. Winning or losing or initiative will just, more than anything, any time before, make or break the game. I'll state for the record, from my experience playing these rules, no competitive format I am responsible for will use this rule so long as the current tables are an option, to the point where if I have to make custom reference charts and reference tables to make this work in the format, I will.
Don't threaten him. He will. I've seen him before.
I have some graphic design ability.
Yeah, the custom chart in this case just being the current chart.
Well, we don't know what else they're proposing, so
Yeah, well, you can just copy that over. So I will take a slightly more measured rule. Like I said, I have one game played with these rules, and I took a lot of, and well, this is one game of experience, so this is purely anecdotal. I think the thing Nicholas is worried about most is effectively high damage units that are very good at positioning. Is that correct?
Oh yeah.
And I think part of this is already a very strong strategy in the game as it is.
It's my go-to strategy. This just makes the way I play better.
That's true. I do think it is kind of worth tempering this as a mech which is taking kind of probabilistically a guaranteed kill against your average mech in this case is like what tonnage? Like the point that I was trying to make is, so 147 damage is a load of damage. And I think right now my understanding is most of the kind of playtesting I have seen of this rule online has been fairly up on it. And I think a lot of that, and this is something that I saw in my games, comes down to the fact that dealing 147 damage, even when you know that's the best thing you can do, is really hard. And I know I'm racking up the swear count here, but one of the things that I did, and this is kind of getting into game talk a little bit before, but I ran a Firestarter with an XL engine, and I ran a Wraith with an XL engine as part of the game that I played over the weekend with these playtest rules. And one of the things I saw was oftentimes my opponent, even when they were concentrating fire, was dealing on average maybe 20 to 30 damage a turn. Like that was like their absolute maximum. Realistically, they did not manage to deal more than I think 20 damage to either of my two XL engine mechs in a turn. And because I had the speed granted by those XL engines, oftentimes what I could do is I could juggle them between my side arcs. So yes, my left side gets pretty ripped up because I take a couple of turns of fire to it, and then the next turn, because they're firing at me with like a Banshee and a Rifleman, they can't move a whole lot, I put myself in a position where I'm only presenting my right arc to them, and now, yeah, they can still hit me in the center torso, but all of the other parts of my mech that they were previously firing at are hidden. So while I do agree that the kind of impacts of this change are pretty gnarly if you are playing with incredibly high alpha mechs, those incredibly high alpha mechs are difficult to get a hold of, and I think for 90% of games, people aren't going to necessarily see that because you will be able to kind of turn over turn kind of dodge some of this stuff.
If you're playing against Wall of Steel, yes. I was taking on average from Nicholas's Green Birds into my Gray Cats. I was taking on average 50 plus damage a turn per arc.
Okay.
Yeah, in one turn, I basically completely obliterated his Warhammer.
So I guess here's the thing, like, I know you guys have feelings about Goonhammer, but a concept they have, which I think is useful, is the "oh god, please stop" threshold of damage, which is the amount of damage that you do to something, in which case it doesn't necessarily matter how small the clusters are. It's going to either delete or cripple the mech. And I think the simple answer is 50 damage is approaching that limit.
To a 75 tonner? No.
No, what I'm saying is, so 50 damage converted out of, I don't know how much was getting thrown at you. Like,
I think the only thing that missed consistently was the ATM. 12.
Okay, so, yeah,
largely because that guy died early on.
Because I had capped him.
Yeah, that's an amount of, like, that is, like, an "oh god, please stop" amount of damage that's getting converted.
But, like, my Masakari and my Warhammer.
Mm-hmm.
My Warhammer lost its torso the first turn. The Masakari took 3 turns, and that's just because Nicholas couldn't tell his left from his right.
Yeah, I made that mistake. I'll also throw out, I used an Incubus 3, and it took an entire Alpha Strike from a Warhawk and lived because the damage distribution got spread throughout. If he had hit twice in any arm or any torso.
Well, yeah, every single thing on that Masakari connected to that Incubus. And that was an amount of damage. Laser in the laser jar. And I cracked the torso and then did not touch it again.
Garner, like, literally told me he was not going to play taking advantage of these arcs just to see what the difference was. And I built a force specifically to take advantage of this. Now, I think a huge difference in talking to people about their experience with this rule is so many people brought the units they normally brought their normal force to see how does this feel with what I usually use. And it's kind of a narrative, right? You have your set group of named pilots and groups that come in and that you don't change much. In competitive, I built a list, and this is the way I play anyway, so I know what to grab, which, Incubus 3, Goshawk, Fire Falcon, with a Cougar Prime as backup. In this list, I had something very similar when I played against somebody else, where it just chooses a position and blasts out a torso. Oh, if it doesn't deal enough damage, it just tries again from a different arc, and it just keeps hitting that same spot and things just die.
My issue, like, I don't particularly have an issue with the side arcs being changed to be more user friendly. My issue is that how the new side arcs can be taken advantage of by people who care more about winning the game or they get their fun from winning the game and not from also having fun with their opponent.
Yeah, and I can understand that. Part of it is not to go too kind of inside baseball, but my understanding is kind of the reason for this proposed change was specifically to do with kind of the ease of use for players, and part of me wonders if this is a change that can be done entirely lexically. Like, what if instead of having left arc, right arc, center, front/rear arc, what if instead you had front/rear, and then you had a generic side arc table that went that did like facing and non-facing side?
I mean, that's what it is right now.
They are explicitly not taking suggestions. They are rejecting any suggestions or any alternate input. It's just yes or no on the proposed rules.
Yeah.
But that's basically what they have right now, and that's actually one of my biggest issues with the current table, because I learned the current table in a slightly different way. So when I started playing with people other than like my brother and like the 3 people I played with in San Diego before I moved to Rochester 15 years ago, it was you take the normal front rear chart. If you are in the left arc, you basically do a -1 to the combined die roll, so the 8 becomes a 7, and then you take off an extra arm hit on the right side and becomes a leg at the top at the number 11. And then conversely, you did the right arc, the opposite thing would happen, the 6. So the right torso would shift up to be the 7, the CT. You'd lose one of the left arm hits, and it would show up back at the bottom on a 3 as a right leg. And because that way it was just shifting the values that you were rolling by 1. It's the same odds as what the actual BattleTech tables were. It's just you always remembered left high, right low. And just if you were in the arc, you just shift your numbers by 1.
That, would work for me. John, as the narrative representative here, what are your thoughts on this?
So what I would have liked from a narrative perspective is if they actually made torso twisting more usable, more of a good idea. So much in the lore is twisting to avoid a shot or twisting to absorb a shot, things like that. If they had considered this change, if you're in the side arc and they're not twisted towards you, use this table. I mean, it makes it more complicated, which is the exact opposite of what they want. But if you could torso twist, now you're using the table as it exists, because I can obviously see both torsos now. Yeah, the leg gets a little odd hitting the opposite side, but the main thing I don't like about it is it makes it too easy to focus fire. Whether it ever comes up, I don't know, but as you've said, the math doesn't lie. It's obviously I can concentrate fire now more than I ever could, and it just makes more sense to, if I can't get your rear arc, then I'm going to go for your side arc. Well, in fact, arguably it's even better for the side.
Yeah, I wouldn't even go for the rear. I would just go for left, right.
And now you don't have to move 180 degrees around them. You only have to go 45 or whatever it is. So, but yes, my fix was let's add torso twist and make that mean something. But yes, they're not taking suggestions, and that makes it even worse.
In this case, the way this is being done is it does effectively add in torso shielding. It's just you do it in reverse.
One of the ways that before my brother and I even had rule books, really, and we were just kind of playing with, I don't even remember what we were using for rules, because like we had rules, but like I don't know what it was, but like we played it where during movement you declared your torso twist, that's your direction. All shots were coming based on your torso twist direction, not your actual mech's direction. Like that's how we played.
And I think I must be Mandela or Berenstain or something myself here, thinking that there was a reason. Yeah, exactly. You declared torso twists, and that has never come up. It's like, oh, nope, you twisted this way, so now you can't shoot at me. I mean, I can see where that would happen in a game. Well, no, you actually turned that way. You forgot I was over on your other side. But it seems like maybe it's something they did drop, that there was a reason to declare those twists.
As long as I wasn't Mandela affecting, because like I certainly remember doing that, and like because we would specific put the die on whatever face we torso twisted to, so we both would know where were we looking, so that way we could avoid fire.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that never made it into TAC Ops or something like that.
So again, the idea of this kind of torso twisting and shielding does exist in the current rules. You just do it in reverse. You determine you invite someone into your side arc as part of your movement phase, and then you torso twist to return fire on them, as opposed to doing it kind of the more mech warrior way of pointing your reticle at someone and then hauling around to present more armor to them.
Oh yeah, I abused that to no end in Mech Warrior Online. I used to competitively play that too, and I used to do that a lot with my Victor with AC-20.
We'll probably end up talking about this rule a bit more when we get into games played, but I want to move on to some more of the proposed rules and changes. There's this first rules packet. There is a cap on ammo explosion damage. So ammunition and component explosion damage is capped at base 20, 10 if you have case, and 1 if you have case 2. And I believe other people have stronger opinions on this proposed change than I do, so I will cede the floor.
This change I'm completely fine with. I think one of the most compelling things that I see about BattleTech as a game system is this kind of tension and modifier management that happens over the course of the game, where it transitions from a game of kind of terrain and ranging management in the early phases to a game of damage control in the late phases, where you are kind of fighting against your failing machine as it goes down to try and take someone out with you. This has been one of those things that's great in theory. It's great when it kind of all the stars align and you have Mercury in retrograde and everything goes according to kind of this plan of how damage failure is supposed to pay out. Unfortunately, the way this functions in reality more often than not is you roll a crit and you go, oh, ammo bin, mech's dead, and you don't get to participate in that kind of damage mitigation step of the game. So these changes, I think, are quite positive. I think the amounts of damage, even uncased, are crippling to a mech. 20 damage that transfers entirely through internals is going to screw basically anything it hits over big time. But I do appreciate that the unit is still on the field. You can still make a fighting retreat. You can still try and make the best of your circumstances. I guess that's my pitch on these. I think the ammo cap is a fantastic idea. I think the people who are kind of saying that the cap is too low aren't reading the ammo explosion rules correctly.
When Mercury is in Gatorade, yes, that stuff can happen. But here's the thing is that, again, as the resident Inner Sphere stan, my XL engine still kills me. So
okay.
The benefit is that if you are, was it a 70 tonner with no internal damage and you have a cased side torso XL engine, you will live. That is the benefit now. Below that, the benefits have not changed.
It's actually significantly better than that, Garner. A 50 tonner has 12 pips of internal structure, so you can take 1 point of damage into a cased ammo explosion and you'll keep your side torso.
I meant to say not cased.
Oh, so uncased, yes, an uncased ammo explosion will destroy the side torso of anything except for a 100 tonner.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
I have no idea what math I was mathing.
So if you are playing with uncased engines, yes, it is still a serious threat. It is still lethal to an XL engine. However, it does mean that XL engines with case are now kind of a thing that is usable outside of campaign play. And it means that in intro tech games, which is where you see most uncased standard fusion engines, you will actually be able to hobble your way off the field in a lot of cases, as opposed to previously where a lot of intro tech designs have just uncased bare ammunition in a side torso, and they just go up like a firecracker looking at you, marauders.
The other benefit is that now you won't have people just dumping their machine gun ammo at the start of the game.
Oh yeah, that's also true.
But here's the big thing. Here's the big thing to note. If I'm remembering correctly, since I'm out of town right now, so I don't have my computer and stuff in front of me. The ammo explosion is a flat damage.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter how much or how little ammo you have.
I think it's a cap. If you have one shot of a autocannon 5 left, you take 5 damage.
Yeah.
I thought it was a flat damage now.
The damage can't go above 20. They aren't increasing the floor of damage to 20. That's mostly a thing for like weird pieces of equipment which have explosive rules around them, like coolant pods and heavy lasers.
So, in my LRM mix, I used to shoot my LRM 15s down to like 1 shot per bin before I would move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Because I wouldn't die from that ammo explosion. But that would give me backup ammo if they do lose other ammo or something like that.
So in this case, yes, that tactic will still function kind of as is. So yeah, I think as far as the change goes, I think this makes this adds an extra e-stop on the kind of rung of the kind of damage mitigation side of the game. I think that's very good. No, it doesn't kind of benefit all mechs. If you have uncased XL engines, then it will still cause you no end of grief, but you also get a big BV discount from doing that, so I'm not going to shed too many tears for you.
Yeah.
This rule, I do think, makes clan mechs better, as they all default to having regular case.
I mean, Omni-mechs, yes.
No, it's everything.
I thought the Warhammer C, I think, didn't have it or something weird.
The Warhammer C is weird. If it has a clan internal structure, it has case. If you see a mech with clan weapons that does not have case on explosives, it is because it has an internal structure based on inner sphere tech.
Yeah, and the Clan C and the Warhammer C and the Warhammer C2 are inner sphere tech where they gutted the weapons and replaced them with clan techs. The C3 is the full rebuild.
Oh, the C3's gross.
Yeah, I do think this change will kind of impact clan mechs. I don't think it'll impact them as much as a lot of people are thinking it will, but we'll see.
I like it in, again, a narrative sense. It makes sense. In a lot of fiction, things shake off ammo explosions, cased or otherwise. It blows an arm off, they keep going. The internal structure shudders, but it just shuts down. It doesn't immediately confetti the mech. Like, I like the idea of that. I like it means more salvage. It means more repair rules. It means your pilot's alive longer, things like that. Of course, I think the easy change too would have just been don't make machine gun ammo explode. Like that probably would have solved a lot of it. But I mean,
I don't think that would have. I don't think that would have solved most of the problem.
Marauder looking at you.
Well, it would have gotten rid of the meme of dumping your machine gun ammo and like why do bullets explode worse than massive tank shells? But I read some other opinions on it too, and it made sense, at least in the intro tech days. How is this 200-year-old Shadowhawk still running around? It's like, you mean to tell me it never had an ammo explosion in 200 years? Like, the thing would have been completely destroyed. With these rules, okay, yeah, maybe it was able to walk it off, or it was at least rebuilt and things like that. So I like it from that perspective.
And I'm actually not going to lie to you, John. Part of the reason why I have not been a particularly big proponent of narrative play is I play a lot of pickup games, and I know that the way a lot of mechs die and the way a lot of pilots die is irrecoverable damage due to bad crits. And I don't find that narratively fulfilling, and I think it ends up turning into a thing where a lot of the times you need to kind of scramble for justifications to explain away how a mech or a pilot hasn't just like entirely vaporized when by the rules of the game, yes, they absolutely have.
Yeah.
So I think that like changes like these make me more interested in narrative play as a player, because I don't feel like I am just going to get smote down by God, basically, for daring to play a mech with ammunition.
Now, I'm going to mention it here briefly because I feel like we can talk about this more fully after Packet 2, but edge is an important thing in both competitive and narrative in dealing with these sort of catastrophic situations.
Yeah, I was going to say, in the narrative, we've got a lot of edge getting thrown around. Turning on auto eject for ammo explosions. Like, nobody worries about that in a pickup game. But in the RPG, I at the beginning of every battle, I ask, all right, who has their auto eject turned on, who doesn't? And it's important.
Circle back to the machine gun ammo meme. I can explain to you why machine gun ammo is more damaging than an AC-20 going on. Because it's the same reason why a 5.56 round, like the NATO rounds, are significantly deadlier than a 7.62 from an AK.
Spalling and shrapnel.
Yeah, it bounces. It bounces off all the bones and just starts severing a whole bunch of crap inside. Sure, it doesn't make a big old hole, but it sure tears up internals.
That 200 rounds of machine gun ammo is probably more like 2,000 or 20,000, something like that at mech scale. So Yeah,
Yep, and it's all plinging around, putting holes in Myamers and stuff until it's Swiss cheese. Things falling over. Whereas those 7 rounds of AC-20 cook-off, they're going straight out the chest. Boom, gone.
Same
now
result.
You just have a gaping hole.
Different way
in
of getting
the chest.
there.
Rules proposal packet number 2, which is the movement rules. Now, I know we do have some strong opinions on this. I got one playtest. There's lots in here. I don't necessarily want to, because we are limited a little bit on time, go into every single change. But in overall, there's a lot of fighting skill rolls that come up whose difficulty has been dropped by 1, right? Gyro hits, standing up, all these other things. And I'll state my opinion. Initially, I really didn't like it. Playtesting it, my concern was it makes piloting less valuable, and I think it still does. But my incubus that took a leg hit, and even though their PSRs were easier, it did let me make more moves and continue on and potentially trigger more PSRs. And that's the one thing I didn't dawn on me just looking at the rules as written here, which is that yes, things are easier, but you can still make more of the rolls now. It makes the gameplay a bit more dynamic. It makes it so that when you take a hit, the mech isn't just dead in the water all of a sudden.
Yeah.
As Luke said, it doesn't turn into you versus your piloting role at the end of the game.
I mean, I play with upskilled pilots consistently, like specifically piloting skill upskills. Like that clan force I brought against you on our test game, Nicholas, it was all pilot skill 4s.
Well, it's basically
And
turning
I
all
just
your
didn't
4/5s into a 4/4. Like it.
Yeah, so now I became 4/3s, and I just didn't care.
Yeah.
I lost leg actuator, cool, whatever.
This public playtest specifically is turning your 4/5 into a 4/4, but not for the purposes of damage. You are not getting better at doing charges, you're not getting better at doing kicks or punches. This is just improving. Basically, this is keeping your mechs out of the tumble dryer for longer, because as kind of Nicholas alluded to, oftentimes what will happen in current rules is a mech gets its leg ripped up, and then you try and stand up a couple of times, and then eventually you're beaten into submission, and you realize the only thing you can do is maybe careful stand. And I think this is making the kind of damage mitigation and risk calculation of the later game more interesting by making the numbers easier to make on individual rolls. But I think it's also important to remember that the way the game is set up right now, piloting skill rolls are a binary pass-fail. So if you have to make 3 PSRs in one turn on, say, a 7-up, which is, I think, a 58% chance of success? If you have to make, say, 2 7-up piloting skill rolls, that on its own, very makeable. Once you add 2, you have a 33% chance of standing up. If you have to make 3, then it becomes a 19% chance of standing up. So I think overall, making just being able to stay on your feet a little bit longer, which is what I think a lot of this is in service of, I think that's a good change. I think it makes fights that have kind of come down to the half destroyed slab fights a little bit more interesting and mobile, instead of just 2 functionally immobile pieces of junk just kind of firing what remaining weapon they have at each other and just kind of waiting for the other person to bleed out. It removes some of that, which I think is overall a better thing for the game. That said, one change that I do have some mixed opinions on is the definition of immobile getting changed. So there's kind of 2 big things here that you need to know. So a mech that is reduced to 0 MP due to damage, so this is specifically leg actuator hits effectively, is now considered immobile. If a mech has its gyro destroyed or is reduced to 0 MP by heat, it is not considered immobile. but a mobile mech is treated as destroyed for the purposes of calculating the number of mechs per side when determining movement selections. This, you can still fire your weapons, but this means effectively you are forced to, like, your mech is not considered for movement initiative. You do not get it as basically a sinking activation. This is, I think, a good change. This ended up creating a lot of kind of cheesy situations where you have kind of mechs asleep or mechs that are effectively mission killed, which are allowing you as the player to kind of gain extra knowledge by forcing your opponent to take moves while you just pass useless mechs. On the other hand, it does mean a lot of slow mechs like, say, urban mechs, annihilators, awesomes, basically anything that is 3-5 or lower now have to be very careful, especially in like a combined arms context when you're dealing with elementals, because leg actuator damage can just mean you lose all of your movement very quickly and you become immobile and you get -4 to hit. That can go south very quickly. These playtest packets have stated that they are specifically for battle mechs only, but they also say general wording and game effects can be adjusted for other relevant unit types, so I would expect this change in a game with kind of elementals and tanks is going to be significant. I think if this is a change that they also roll out to combat vehicles, that is going to make combat vehicles a lot more punishing, because it is going to... Actually, no, it's not, because combat vehicles already, when they hit the massive damage, that already just immobilizes them. For slow mechs specifically, this is going to be a pretty significant change in any game with battle armor on the field.
In terms of competitive organization, I believe that piloting is already... I think it's valuable, but people devalue it and go after gunnery to a greater extent. And there was a balancing mechanism where a player who chose not to invest in piloting anywhere, you could take advantage of that. You could charge forward. Okay, you could run forward, not charge them. Charging is a bad word to use right now, but you could go and you could kick them. You could kick them and they would fall, and if they didn't invest, you have a chance to just not get them back up, and you could continue to try to get for pilot hits. You wanted to run forward, you want to kick them, you want to punish them for not investing in piloting. There's a way to take advantage of that, particularly if you have improved piloting. And these rules make that less valuable.
The thing I will say to push back against that is this doesn't change anything. So what you are describing there is just kicking a mech and having it fall over on failing the 5-up. Nothing that is in this packet changes that.
Getting up afterwards is easier.
Yes, but here's the thing. If you are standing up, that's 2 MP, and also you cannot use jump jets. That is a pretty significant, stressor already, I would say. In some ways, yeah, you can get away with doing a kind of a 5-up, but also you do still have to contend with the fact that you do still have to make that kind of stand happen. And I think the idea that like I joked about, the idea of putting someone in the tumble dryer as kind of a valuable tactic and not just kind of an annoying and frustrating thing that happens sometimes is, I don't know that that's necessarily something that we want to encourage. It's something clearly Catalyst doesn't want to encourage. And I would say it doesn't necessarily devalue pilots, because on the same token, if you as the person who has brought the skill 4 pilot falls over, you have a 1 in 36 chance of not standing up now. That's pretty stellar. I know, Garner, for instance, you play a lot with ultra autocannons, and you know for a fact 1 in 36 is pretty damn good odds. People just get scared of it for no reason. Yeah, in some ways, this makes skilled pilots able to do crazy nonsense instead of even when fighting through kind of damage and failures, as opposed to just being able to play the game at a baseline, which is kind of what we were seeing already. Because again, it's, if you get your leg ripped up under the current rules, I'm just looking through a scenario I know I've had in one of my games. If you take, say, a foot actuator and then both of your leg actuators, and you take more than 20 damage in a phase, you now have to make, with a normal skill pilot, 4 9-ups. Yes, you can theoretically try to roll that many 25% chance that many times, but also it is kind of futile. So that is, I think, one of the things that I appreciate about this.
I would say that high pilot skill pilots benefit more from this.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Lower skilled pilots, simply on the fact of, think about it like this. You're Black Lantern. I get a lucky tack on your hip, or your gyro or something. Now you invested all of that BV to be the same piloting skill as me. Or, under the new proposed changes, you still at least get some benefit. You still, because I'm looking at it in the lens of, it makes getting crippled before you get to the enemy with somebody that's meant to be in physical combat still viable in physical combat after getting torn all to heck and back.
Yeah, this all makes sense. And I stress with this one, it's not a strong dislike or strong concern about this. Like, these become standard rules. There's nothing in here in the movement packet that I would have. Like, I'd be like, all right, these are the rules now. Like, that's...
I think, and we've been going far too long on kind of the actuator changes, which I think we can all agree are, at worst, milk dust, at best, quite decent. There are some, I think, actually pretty significant changes in here to the ways you engage with terrain that I do want to get some talk on as well.
I hear you're a water enjoyer.
Oh yeah, I played with this just a little bit, and I gotta say, the ability to make it over a depth 1 water hazard in 1 turn in a 4/6 mech, bellissima. I got a +1 TMM while I was doing that, and I felt like a fucking rock star. I'm not scared of going into water anymore, and I really appreciate that for the rules change.
See, whereas I'm the opposite. I dislike the water changes a little bit, because I feel like it makes maps with like rivers and stuff just so strong for everybody involved. It's so strong defensively, excuse me. The change that I loved was being able to back up downhills.
Yep, backing up downhills is also a really good one.
Big fan of that.
The big kind of upshot I got from this movement packet is where the packet 1 is kind of a mixed bag of one change severely kind of impacts survivability in a positive way. One of them, kind of depending on the damage output of a list, can kind of swing between positively and negatively impacting survivability. All of the changes in this rule packet were all about kind of allowing you to do more interesting things deeper into the game with your movement, and I think all of the changes they made were very good for that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Something we mentioned earlier that we can talk about now. This rules packet and a little bit of the last one have this sort of concept of, like you say, the tumble dryer effect, the catastrophic effect, the tack, the really bad thing that starts the domino effect of other really bad things. And I know we have implemented in the Salvage, in Iliad, and in Odyssey, a form of edge that allows players to try at least once during the game to avoid that really bad thing. And that's also something in narrative, and it's just, is that something to counteract some of this, to benefit some of this? Is edge something that should be considered? I know it's more of a format meta rule, but something that should be more standardized or considered.
This is something that I kind of talked about with you guys earlier. I see these two things as fundamentally different changes. Edge, as we have it, as it exists right now, is an emergency stop feature to prevent tragedies. It's the thing that keeps you from like sitting out of the game for 30 minutes because you ate a headshot at an inopportune moment. I think it continues to be very useful for this. A lot of these rules changes are to kind of decrease the slope of the death spiral that mechs experience, so you can have more meaningful gameplay opportunities during that death spiral, and you can manage that death spiral better.
All but one rule change decreases the death spiral.
One of the rules changes is the like slip and slide out of the castle of doom under someone's feet, as far as death spirals go. There's a difference between being able to kind of negate an unlikely and tragic event and in totality kind of allowing players to fight through setbacks as they come up. And I think that kind of struggle against setbacks is kind of an important thing that I find conceptually compelling about BattleTech, but it has kind of historically failed to deliver. And I think a lot of these changes are doing things to improve that situation for me.
Because, Luke, you have a limit on the time you're available here. You have a hard cap. I know we're going to talk more about these rules because...
I have 15 minutes.
Yeah, Luke, like Garner and I played a game for rules test, and that's going to be my games played. But I want to give you the opportunity to take the floor here and talk about the game you played for your rules test.
Yep.
So that you can have that, and if you need to bail out, we'll say goodbye and thank you for joining.
Yeah, so I already talked about this a little bit. This was kind of half and half, me testing out some of these playtest rules and teaching a local player who was interested in our Iliad format kind of what a game for that looks like. And so my list was a kind of Free Worlds League augmented lance that I came up with. It was centered around a Flashman 9M, which is quite nasty, just kind of energy flash bulb. It's built around a pair of heavy PPCs with a lot of secondary medium lasers that it can kind of vomit at people if they get too close to it. I also brought a Wraith, which is kind of an all-star, fire starter, a Javelin, which I had just finished painting for the shit and giggles, and then a pair of Desert Scorpions, which is a really cute refit of the Scorpion light tank, which gives it fusion engine and a large laser. It kind of ends up mogging the Bulldog. So if you want a fast alternative to the Bulldog, maybe try it out. My opponent's list was kind of relatively similar in terms of structure. It was 4 mechs plus 2 vehicles, in this case a J. Edgar hover tank, a Manticore main battle tank, and then a Banshee with kind of 2 PPCs that could fire pretty regularly, a Rifleman with a pair of LBX autocannon 10s and some energy weapons, a Firestarter of his own, and then a Stinger with, I think, like a light PPC and some missiles. What I saw out of this kind of immediately was water, I think, was a more usable part of the map. We didn't necessarily see any of the kind of defensive concerns that Garner is kind of opining about. I do think that is something that's kind of worth revisiting. When my stuff moved forward, it frequently had the opportunity to kind of juke between side arcs. So on marginal shots from the fire support mechs, and not even marginal, on shots on like 7s and 8s from the fire support mechs, I was able to spread damage out to the point where I was less concerned about my Wraith and Firestarter taking damage over the course of the game. The first kill we saw was my Flashman killed the enemy Firestarter by just can opening it with the 44 damage of medium lasers that it has as its secondary battery when it got too close. We played that like we were playing this using the kind of side arc rules, and it did kill it doing that. However, it was already pretty severely damaged, and I ran some tests post facto, and in almost all of them, regardless of what arc system we had been using, or if we just used the front arc, it would have died to that damage. So I can't speak to the impact there. One kind of coulda, woulda, shoulda moment that we had was my Firestarter itself. It took some lucky hits, so it had an open center torso for most of the game, and it managed to survive getting sandblasted by the LBX autocannons from that Rifleman at the very end of the game to kind of win things out. I think this is a good example of the kind of concerns that you had, Nicholas, because while in this case I did manage to survive and it was center torso, so nothing would have kind of changed odds-wise. If I had taken, say, left torso hits earlier in the game and I had positioned myself poorly, then that would have significantly impacted my kind of survivability in that case. On the flip side, if I had taken left torso hits and I had jumped in for kind of the winning movement and presented my right torso to my opponent's rifleman and manticore, they really wouldn't have been able to do anything to me because my right side was up to that point relatively untouched. So I think this kind of demonstrates both your concerns over if your opponent has a way of exploiting your own movement, the arc changes can be incredibly debilitating, whereas if you have kind of the tempo advantage over your opponent, you can pretty significantly avoid damage that would otherwise kill your mech.
I know, in my opinion, that a lot of that really comes down to initiative, because if you win initiative, you can either, play defensive and put yourself in you move your mech there, well, I get to choose what arc you're firing at, or you can then take advantage of the end movement of your opponent and place it. And so being able to jump and choose.
I think more than that, it also, it comes down to the kind of movement of mechs becomes a lot more significant in the game. And this is something that, I think we can look at mechs like hyper-mobile mechs that were previously quite overvalued under this rule set. Like, for instance, the Shadowcat may end up being significantly better under these rules because they have the tools to rapidly take advantage of either winning the initiative and kind of exploiting a side arc to punch through damage where it can be at its most effective, or if they lose initiative, they can rapidly withdraw from the field and find positions where it is incredibly difficult for a side arc shot to be bait at them, or they put themselves in a position where you can bait people into side arcs to trade up.
You have a very good point. The Shadowcat is a unit that I've looked at because it in theory fits my playstyle, but the BV cost is so high. But thinking about it now, it's like, it has mask and jump. It has two sort of ways of moving into position.
Insane BV multipliers.
Yeah, but with that Gauss rifle being able, and some backup armament, you choose the position you're shooting a Gauss rifle from. You either go, I'm in your arc, blam, Gauss rifle, or you're short range, you're my short range, I'm in your medium, blam, Gauss rifle, and choosing position, and you left yourself vulnerable, I'm gonna mask my way in there.
Yep.
It in theory, it does become more valuable.
Yeah, I think kind of you were looking at this from the perspective mostly of, it sounds like, kind of fast striker mechs, but I think one of the ones this is going to have the biggest effect on, if this change was to go through, I think you would see the kind of stocks of fast snipers be the ones that are most affected, because they can evade side arc damage by just keeping range open most effectively while also exploiting enemy side arcs in ways that other mechs can't without the threat of an invitation on themselves getting open.
Yeah. Have any sort of comments or thoughts you want to get off before Garner and I probably go a bit more in depth into our game?
It is important to remember, I have played one game with this against a living person. I did do a couple of just kind of playing against myself in my apartment on one map sheet to see what it would do. So my experiences here are not particularly refined. They're quite anecdotal. If we did this for more than playtest time, which was allotted for this, given a couple of maybe a month more of playtesting on this, we would see people seriously start to kind of industrialize these rules and find ways of exploiting them, and I think that might be kind of more useful as feedback for Catalyst. I will sign off at this point, but I will let you guys discuss your match, because it sounds like you saw more of the kind of negative aspect of this, while I saw most of the positive.
Oh yeah, quickly before you go, I want you to hear this part, which is you played against a real human, and it was someone who you were sort of teaching your way through a competitive format.
Yes.
The two games I played, one was with Chris, who joined us for the last episode, and the other was with Garner. The first game was literally a practice in part for a tournament, and the second was Garner and I using sort of competitiveness and practicing in that sense.
I wouldn't really call my list competitive.
Okay, well, at the very least, you are a very skilled player. You're not learning your way through competition. So my experience was definitely a lot more experienced. So that's part of my thoughts. So Luke, thank you so much for joining us as always, and I'm sure we'll catch up and talk soon.
I will see you guys later. It was great talking with you. Catch you on the next one.
Catch you on the next one.
Later.
All right. So, John, I'm going to actually give you the floor here to see if there's anything you want to mention or your playtest if you had one.
Unfortunately, I never did get around to playing anyone. It's all been hypothetical in my head of theory crafting and seeing what it looks like this would do to a game. I still have high hopes of getting in a game at some point here, or 3 or 4, but nothing concrete.
All right. So with that said, my first game was against Chris, and I just want to briefly touch on that, which was I brought in that match a Black Lantern H, Cougar Prime, Incubus 3, and I think like a Howler or something, one other mech. Chris, I'm not actually going to talk about his list because he is bringing it to compete in Southern Assault, but suffice to say, it was a list.
You can because the lists are open.
Chris brought a version of a list he was practicing for Southern Assault, which was very similar to a list that I have made. He had a Turkina B, he had a Black Lantern J, and along with it was a Shadowcat, actually. Because he had also some fast movers, it was kind of interesting to see his attempts to move into position and take advantage of side arcs, but I had more fast movers than he did. The Shadowcat being the one he brought wasn't necessarily prone to take advantage of this, and it ended up just being me popping into the side arc of a Turkina and blasting it away when I normally would not be able to kill it that fast. So I had that sort of preemptive experience, and then Garner and I played a match. And Garner, why don't you talk about going into it first?
All right, so I just took what I had drafted up for my Iliad force, and then only took mechs that added up to the 7,000 BV for us to play King of the Hill. And you brought a more specialized force. So I brought the Warhawk D, I believe, the one with a UAC 10 in one arm, an ATM 9 in the other arm, and then 2 ER mediums and a torso and an emotional support small laser. And it was a 4/4. I also had a 4/4 Locust 2C 3, which is just a large laser and some small pulse lasers. Like 2 small pulse lasers, I believe. And then I brought the heavy laser mist links, also a 4/4. And I had a 4/5 Warhammer C2, which is 2 Clan ER PPCs, a couple medium pulse lasers, a couple medium lasers, a couple small pulse lasers, and a Streak SRM6.
I came into this match thinking how we're going to play test these rules. I'm playing Garner. Let me just take my I am playing to win hat and put it on and bring a bunch of stuff that I've stopped using in competition because I feel bad bringing it, which is number 1, a Goshawk. Nobody likes Goshawks. Nobody wants to be friends with a guy who brings Goshawks, even though if you're watching this on YouTube, my icon is a Goshawk. I brought my favorite combo, an Incubus 3 and a Cougar Prime. Now the Goshawk people don't like because it is jump 6, large pulse laser, medium pulse lasers, streak SRMs, and machine guns. It can open you up and crit you out. It's pretty gross. Plus a targeting computer. So those pulses are all at -3. I brought an Incubus 3, which is a 914 with 2 medium pulse lasers, a streak 6, and 4 machine guns. So again, it'll try to open you up and crit you out. A Cougar Prime, 2 large pulse lasers, and 2 LRM-10s, along with a Fire Falcon E, which is an ATM-12.
With legs.
With legs. All it's got ATM-12, but it's also a base 1000 BV, which is it's a fun little guy. It rarely pays for itself, but it's just kind of nice to walk up and go blam. And so everything I had 3 light mechs and a medium mech versus your assault heavy
and
2 lights.
Yep.
Which normally in a King of the Hill match where everyone's trying to get to the center of the map to a designated area and you score an objective point if you have the most tonnage in that area. Normally you would be in a huge advantage against me.
Yep.
You almost got it.
It came down to the last. Yeah, I still almost beat you with you pulling all the stops.
Yeah, and we both sort of eventually had this conceit of I was making some choices that were not necessarily optimum for the scenario, but were definitely taken to try and take advantage and test these rules. I was playing very aggressive, thinking I'm just going to try to kill you, and if I kill you, then I can claim points as long as you haven't already won.
Yep.
And that's basically what ended up happening, because
First turn, you ran straight onto the hill because you had a bunch of really fast things. Turn 2, you still had it because I just couldn't get there in time, and your lights out-tonned my lights by 5 tons. But then my Warhammer and Warhawk hit the hill at the same time, and then you just flanked me for the rest of the game.
yeah, I think that turned you sort of full on just alpha striked and hit with everything into my Incubus. And the distribution just did not, like, you think you got a leg crit on it, and
I got 2 leg crits, then you passed your pilot skill, and then continued to do what you were doing. Because it was a foot and a leg. I think it was foot and upper.
yeah, that guy still was an 812, but I really didn't move it much. I was just moving it into a bait position, all I was trying to do was to get into the Warhawk's torso with it, and it worked out.
For some reason, the Warhammer just decided it didn't want to hit anything. But the Warhawk was great.
And it just came to a moment where the Warhammer that was completely untouched had to move in, and it ended up in a position where I had the Cougar Prime and I think it was the Goshawk just in its side arc, alpha striked and just completely just annihilated arm into torso.
I'm going to be very clear with the fact that when I was playing, I specifically was setting up my side arcs so that way, no matter where you went, you were either getting a full frontal from the Warhawk or from the Warhammer. Both of which are things you don't really want full frontals from. So it wasn't like, I was playing to like not go back to back and like not being conscientious of being hit in the side arc. I was covering my side arcs and I still got torn apart.
Yeah. Ultimately, the fact of the math, I think, if for someone like myself who's going through and intentionally exploiting it, it is far more favorable to offensive play than defensive play.
Yep. Unless you're like if you're playing long range or like mid range Wall of Steel, it has defensive capability, but is very abusable if you're playing skirmishers.
As I've seen people comment where it's quite clear their normal way of playing is, again, Steiner Wall of Steel versus Wall of Steel. They're like, we're playing big mechs versus big mechs. I can turn and choose which arc you hit me in. Ha ha ha, this is so nice defensively. But again, I'm showing up with a Goshawk and an Incubus. Like, you have Intersphere XL, I'm just going to chew through you.
Well, also remember, Nicholas, that I do believe that the most common era, like the most common thing is like 30-25 intro tech is like one of the most commonly played.
Yeah, it's one of the goals. I think Clan Invasion is still the most popular, but Introtech is pretty high up there.
And with Introtech, I can see this being good for.
Yeah.
There isn't big damage that is also fast.
Yeah. Honestly, a lot of these changes are really advantageous towards clans. That's my opinion. I can't say that for certain.
Hey, they need the help, all right?
Already highly mobile, dishing out more damage, now just doing it better.
Yeah, they need the help, all right? You need more of that crutch.
Ammo explosions hurt less, we're faster, bigger guns. Now, the list I brought, normally in normal King of the Hill, I know should not have been.
Oh, yeah.
It would not, like, I've been through this so many times with lists like I have brought this list minus the Fire Falcon to an event, and King of the Hill's my weakest. I have tried to, in a normal game, chew through a Wall of Steel, and it does generally not work because they show up in there and just like, all right, like, you're trying to kill a Banshee. Sure, you're hitting all of the time with all of your pulse lasers, but it's a freaking Banshee. It costs 1,000 BV. It's 95 tons, and you just shoot through max armor. Go ahead and try, because there's another thing just as heavy right next to it. You're not going to kill these mechs fast enough to win this scenario.
Yep.
And I was able to kill you fast enough to win the scenario. Now, granted, you weren't a Steiner Wall of Steel, but
I was not.
It should not have happened.
I just happened to get the shotgun spread on your Goshawk.
Yeah, and it came down to, I think, literally, yeah, my Goshawk was alive and out-tunned your 2 lights. And if you could knock it out, it was pretty hurt. But if you could knock it out, you'd win. And you didn't, and I got that final 4th point. So,
yeah, the list that I brought was literally just what I already had on hand, because I had taken all of my Fed Suns out of my bag to do some laser gemming.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think the side torso rule, if implemented in a competitive event, is going to really favor people who choose to exploit this change and bring units like the ones I bring, in which case having played Chris, who had a similar sort of ability, it came down to initiative.
Yep, and that's what our game turned into.
It comes down to initiative, and that's not a good way to play. It doesn't feel very good to just have initiative, that's the random thing at the start, determine victory versus skill. It's just a matter of, okay, you won, you win initiative, you got in my side arc and blasted something. I win initiative, I get in your side arc and blast something. That's not good gameplay.
But even when you lost initiative, you still just got into my side arc and blasted something. The initiative didn't.
Well, I'm talking about if I was fighting a mirror matchless or mirror sort of play of like 2.
Yeah.
It's again like 2 Goshawks. It's just initiative. You get in the arc or you don't get in the arc. And you can try to like run away, but then extends the game out. And it just, I don't think it's good engaging gameplay. And it's why I say I see no way currently that someone could convince me that to use this rule in a competitive format that I run.
Oh, I'm looking at it in terms of, I'm also looking at it in terms of even for like narrative play stuff. So in my narrative campaign that I play in once a month up here in Rochester, I run a javelin, a fire javelin specifically, and I am a 4-2. Gunnery 4, piloting 2, with SPAs, melee master, and the next one down was basically I get to, once per game, get to double physical attack once in a physical combat step, and then my melee attacks are -1 to hit and +1 damage. And just looking at it from that regard, where if I can just, I already see how powerful hitting just one leg is, because I will go and get right next to a mech and get into one side and just pop my special pilot ability that lets me double kick and slam 2 kicks into the same side leg and just rip it off, and half the torso armor, and not much we can do about it. And that's effectively what I'm seeing then. Like, if I can do that with my punches too, where I have a chance to punch you in the head twice, and even if I miss, I still just take a massive chunk out of only your right side, I'll take that any of the day of the week.
Yeah.
There's the TSM Ossul that I absolutely love running, which I have shelved because it's too good. It's too good for this world. It just does what it needs to do very, very well. And so that's 2 12 damage punches. If I don't hit your head and I'm only hitting the right side, there's 24 damage to the right side in the physical. And that's not including all of the laser shenanigans that goes on in its torsos too, also, because it's just filled with pulse lasers and 2 ER larges.
So John, I know you didn't play a playtest, but set the floor here for you to talk about a game you've played, or just your turn to talk about playing the game.
I have not done much playing of the game lately, unfortunately. In fact, a lot of my BattleTech time has been getting ready for FlagCon.
Yeah, you got the map from me.
Yes. Well, I'm going to print that soon. I'm using the Desert BFM for this particular one because I had already started down the path of printing everything for it, which is done. I just need to paint buildings and paint minis and probably 20 something minis. Whether I end up using all that or not, I'm not sure, because I'm going to vary the number of units based on how many people show up for the event, but it could be as many as 10, 12 per side. Technically 2 sides, but yeah. In fact...
Well, why don't you tell us what you're doing to start?
Oh, for FlagCon?
Yeah.
It is the 2023 worldwide event, which, because we still don't have an official one, here's your CDT rant corner. I've been working on this list for probably 2 months now. It is the opening acts of the new Star League, but not actually the new Star League, fighting back against the Capellans, hitting some of the planets immediately around Earth. In this case, it happens to be New Earth. So it's specifically not New Star League. It is Clan Wolf, along with Clan Snow Raven, Smoke Jaguar, and Jade Falcon.
Aren't the Snow Ravens Raven Alliance now? Or did they split that down?
Yes, technically Raven Alliance.
Okay.
It's supposed to be mainly the Wolves and Raven Alliance with a smattering of help from what's left of Jade Falcon and Smoke Jaguars. But the way I divided up the mechs, it's actually pretty balanced, but I think the heavier mechs belong to Clan Wolf and I believe the Jade Falcons. Because I tried to do very iconic mechs this time around because I'm like, I don't own a lot of the metal minis. I'd like to get more. What are really iconic mechs? All the bird mechs for the Falcons.
Bird.
Tundra Wolf, Savage Wolf, Storm Wolf, anything with Wolf I grabbed. Crow, War Crow, Dark Crow, Carrion Crow for the Raven Alliance, and then all the funky Capellan mechs.
Did you grab the Iron Cheetah since it went back on sale on Ironwind?
I have not grabbed that, no, but I do need to grab it.
I did finally pick one up, and I was cheering.
So it's going to be technically player versus player. I'm going to mostly just adjudicate things unless I only have 2 people show up, in which case I'll jump in and play. But it's going to be Capellans versus the clans, basically. The 3rd Star League, and it should be interesting. I think, well, we know canonically now who won. In 2023, I believe the Capellans managed to squeak out a win when all the play groups around the world played it. But canonically, the clans won, and they've basically reclaimed all of Prefecture 10, what was Prefecture 10. So they booted them back out in a good dozen or so planets.
So throwing it out there for anyone listening who is in sort of like the New York State who can make it out, we are talking about a worldwide event for FlagCon, which is the Finger Lakes area gaming convention. And Garner can't make it. He'll be at Southern Assault, but both John and I will be there. I'll be running a salvage free-for-all event on Friday and Sunday. John will be running this worldwide event on Saturday. I forget the exact time.
2 to 7, I believe. 2 to 6, 2 to 7.
2 to 7 on Saturday, and this is it is November 7th through 9th. There's the salvage on Friday and Sunday with the worldwide event on Saturday, and I will be there all of these days. John, I will be there to be as a player, be as an op4, to help with whatever you need, setup and all of that. I'll be your wingman, second command here.
Yes, and I do need to get on the promo bandwagon. I've been meaning to post more about it. I've been waiting till I had things painted up a little bit more just to show some progress of what you could expect. I've got the full BFM printed out. That'll be all 3D. That's all ready to go. So it'll be an interesting fight.
Well, let me know if you need some smoke jags. I got you.
Players, minis. Well, you've got minis, yeah.
Minis. I've got the minis.
Yeah.
And while we're on the topic of promotion, because this will be dropping on Monday the 13th, if you're listening to this and you can make it, we are doing a special one-day Iliad tournament on Saturday, October 18th, starting at 10 a.m. It is the birthday battle, so we are sort of celebrating the Iliad, having our first tournament. It's 3 rounds. You can bring a list day of or send it to me. I'll sort of prove it and check it. It's also a celebration of my birthday and a goodbye party because I am moving out of Ithaca and to Rochester. I'm not leaving the community, but I'm just gonna, it's gonna be more of a long distance trying to run stuff. But obviously, I'm not leaving the Odysseus Legion, and the people who are remaining in Ithaca. I mean, the Ithaca events are in great hands. I'm still gonna be coming down to run the salvage once a month for sure.
Oh, speaking of the 13th, so the 13th, I'm pretty sure is when lists are due. The Southern Assault Classic event.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to hear how Chris does. I want either of you to do very well and win. I will be super excited if you get first place, Gardner. But like, if he gets it with a kind of a version of my list that I help him with, I'm gonna be so happy. All right, I think we are good here. So thank you so much for joining us, John, and in representing a little bit of the narrative play as we rant about rules changes.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Garner, as always, thanks for joining.
Yep, no problem.
And Luke, I know you're not here at the moment. You already said goodbye, but I'm just going to say goodbye again.
Insert soundbite here.
You caught me when I was drinking a swig of beer. Hello.
Thank you for listening to the Odysseus Legion podcast. This podcast was created by the Odysseus Legion, a BattleTech club organizing play around Central and Western New York State. Rules for all our formats, as well as a calendar of Odysseus Legion events, can be found on our website, odysseuslegion.com. I want to take a second to highlight 2 important upcoming events. The first is a special one-day Iliad tournament coming up on Saturday, October 18th, starting at 10 a.m. This is a combination birthday party and going away party for me, as I am leaving Ithaca for Rochester. Next month, as mentioned, is the Finger Lakes Area Gaming Convention, which runs from Friday, November 7th through Sunday, November 9th. At FlagCon, we have multiple BattleTech events scheduled, including 2 salvage free-for-alls and a BattleTech worldwide event featuring the fight between the newly crowned Ale Clan and Capellan forces. For more information, visit flagconithaca.com. All music and audio in this recording was licensed through Adobe Stock or open source. All views expressed herein are those of the person expressing them and do not necessarily represent the views of the Odysseus Legion, Catalyst Game Labs, or the Catalyst Limo team.
It's going to be so much easier for people to actually understand what the fuck you're talking about than your theoretical platonic ideal of a mech.
Your amorphous mech.
Guys, can we not have the 2 minutes of hate? I know you guys as demo agents are suffering, however.
This will come as a surprise to no one. I have a spreadsheet for this. Yeah, John, I don't know if you could feel the code switch in my voice of like what I know I'm gonna be fucking cutting out, what I'm definitely not. like welcome to the Odysseus Legion podcast. How are you guys doing today? Here's my polite, oh my motherfucking people over there with the goddamn thingy that they're doing, blah blah blah.